pass the marmalade?
That is mahogany!
So it's no secret that I love the Hunger Games series. I read the books when I was honestly way too young to be reading them, and I watched every movie in theaters, again, when I was way too young to be watching them. But either way, it's such a formative series for me. I ate up each of the books super quickly, and the release of each movie was a monumental event in my life. Seriously, I don't think I'll ever forget watching Catching Fire in theaters for the first time, specifically seeing that final shot. The film was near perfect, don't fight me on this, but also I love the other three a whole lot. The first one specifically is nostalgic to me, but it's also just a fun film. Don't get me wrong, it's definitely not perfect. It's got terrible CGI fire, which, spoiler alert, does not get much better in the sequel, still a perfect movie. It's got questionable editing choices, and far too much shaky cam at times where shaky cam is not needed. Literally, what are we even looking at here? But all in all, it's a rather solid film with some really fantastic moments. The entire reaping is incredible, the opening of the games is haunting, and Peeta's final line will never not hit me where it hurts.
So what happens when we get back?
I guess we try to forget.
I don't want to forget.
But I am of the opinion that one of the best things about this film is the very first scene. Before we talk about the opening scene itself, I want to talk about the writing of the Hunger Games as a whole. When looking back at the Hunger Games, you can see how the writing is actually rather strong for a YA book-to-movie adaptation, not only through the actual dialogue, but everything that's not the dialogue. I think the Hunger Games is rather good at showing instead of telling, which is one of the main hallmarks of good writing. For example, Katniss hunting at the beginning of the film. The average viewer may not know the ins and outs of what exactly she's doing, but we can see she's capable and competent, like she's done this 1,000 times, and that's the part that matters. All of her interactions with Gale are also pretty well done. We're shown their camaraderie through their banter and general ease around each other.
What are you gonna do with that when you kill it?
Damn you, Gale! It's not funny.
Fine, laugh at me.
I'm not laughing at you.
Here.
Oh my god. Is this real?
Yeah, better be. Cost me a squirrel. Happy Hunger Games.
And may the odds be ever in your favor.
War. Terrible war.
We also get details about the world that are tactfully and logically woven in.
What are you gonna do with the 100-pound deer, Catnip? It's reaping day. The place is crawling with peacekeepers.
I was gonna sell it. Some peacekeepers.
We could do it, you know. Take off, live in the woods. It's what we do anyway.
They'd catch us. Cut out our tongues or worse.
How many times did your name in today?
42. Guess the odds aren't exactly in my favor.
You're gonna be okay. Don't take any extra food from them. It isn't worth putting your name in more times.
And what I love about all of this is that it's not spoon-fed to us. They give us just enough context to put two and two together ourselves. The District 12 peacekeepers are not much of a threat and often side with the citizens. The government is oppressive and restricts people's freedoms. Your name appears in the reaping more times as the years go by. You can trade your name in the reaping for more food. It's subtle bits of world building that work together to make this story feel that much more three-dimensional without being info-dumpy. It's smart writing. Keeping all that in mind, let's talk about the opening. The opening of the Hunger Games is one of my favorite openings to any film ever. I mean, sure, it's no Inglourious Bastards, but for a YA book-to-movie adaptations, it's pretty damn solid. A lot of YA book-to-movie adaptations start with narration, maybe because the books are often written in first person, at least the ones that were really popular. And because they're in first person, they often have a lot of internal musings about the characters' lives and or the world they live in. And the easiest way to relate all of that is through narration. And yeah, a lot of these movies had it.
I'd never given much thought to how I would die, but dying in the place of someone I love seems like a good way to go.
They say the war was terrible, that the rest of the world was destroyed. Our founders built the wall to keep us safe. Late in the winter of my 17th year, my mother decided that I was depressed.
I've been stuck my whole life in Gatlin, South Carolina's least famous middle of nowhere. I have no idea how to tell this story. I don't even know how to start it.
I'm just like you. For the most part, my life is totally normal.
The forbidden kiss. We knew that it was wrong, that he was betrothed to my sister. It was fated that we should meet like this.
At the age of 26, Ludwig von Beethoven went deaf.
It's like it's impossible for like book to movie adaptations to not start off with narration. Like they can't help it.
Narration isn't inherently bad. When used intelligently, it can be a very effective storytelling tool. But oftentimes in these book-to-movie adaptations, it's not great, especially since it's usually used in the very beginning just to set up our main character and the world and then never returns. Or returns at the very end for reasons. The Hunger Games doesn't use narration at all, which is one of the reasons I respect it so much. Instead, it finds other ways to give us information about the world and the games themselves, such as the commentators. Their addition is one that makes a lot of sense. They're essentially sports commentators, attributing a story to the visuals that viewers are being shown. We don't hear about Katniss's feelings about Panem through voiceover, but rather through her actions and the interactions she has with others. This is extra effort that the writers went to, which shows us as viewers that they really care about how this story is told. Well, if the film doesn't start with narration, then what does it start with? Good question, it's about time I answered it. Let's take a look at the opening scene. Now, I did edit out some of the dead space in the scene, cause copyright, so if you want to see the full unedited scene, it'll be linked in the description. Without further ado, here is the opening scene of The Hunger Games.
I think it's our tradition. It comes out of a particularly painful part of our history.
Yes.
But it's been the way we've been able to heal. At first, it was a reminder of the rebellion. It was a price the districts had to pay. But I think it has grown from that. I think it's something that knits us all together.
This is your third year as game maker. What defines your personal signature?
Fantastic. Okay, let's go through this scene and break down exactly what makes this so amazing. Number 1, world building. Particularly world history. Right off the bat, we're starting to get a little taste of what this world is built on. We get a brief mention of this rebellion, but at this point we don't really know what it's about. We hear about districts, we hear about the price they have to pay, we hear about tradition. It's not a ton, but it's just enough to get us intrigued by the lore, enough for us to pick up all these pieces and file them away in our brains for them to all fall into place later as we continue watching. Number 2, perspective. We see this Hunger Games thing being discussed by these specific people, who describe it as something that was unfortunate at first, that was birthed from pain, but has since evolved into something important in their culture, something that supposedly knits them together. And this is said so matter-of-factly. There's no room for argument, there is no question, not a shadow of a doubt to what he's saying. Everyone agrees with this. It's interesting that this is the first perspective from which we see the Hunger Games because it shows us who's on top. It shows us who is the majority in this world and really drives home the idea of history being written by the winners. This is the perspective of the winners, which in real life we've grown to see as the right perspective. But this tiny bit of information here shows that that might not always be correct, especially if you know what the Hunger Games entails. On top of that, we also start to see the delusion of these people who make up the majority, a collective delusion that makes them see themselves as correct, which leads me to my next point. Number 3, reality TV. I suppose this is also a piece of world building, but I feel like it's important enough to warrant its own separate talking point. These people, Caesar Flickerman and Seneca Crane, are clearly on some sort of talk show. We've got these crazy bright studio lights, a colorful set, the sound of the audience in the background. It's setting up one of the most important factors of the entire world, story, and themes of the Hunger Games. The obsession with reality TV, with entertainment. Because it would be bad enough to host the Hunger Games as it is, but televising it and turning it into entertainment is a different level of gross, and we're shown that immediately. Gamifying the unjust deaths of children is adding insult to injury, yet no one sees anything wrong with it. This dangerous, degrading, oppressive game is just another form of entertainment for these people who have never had to concern themselves with the thought that it might be anything else. In the same vein, we start to set up the vanity of this world. We see it in Caesar's hair, in Seneca's beard, in their weirdly beautiful but restrictive suits. These are people who value this sickly beauty while doing something ugly. And finally, number 4, the games themselves. Near the end of the scene, Caesar asks Seneca, the head game maker, the million-dollar question. What defines your personal signature? Seneca considers this, takes a breath to answer, and we cut to a little girl screaming for her life. This moment may be one of the best bits of subtext / nonverbal / visual / whatever the hell you want to call it storytelling from this series, period. The scream is his answer. His personal signature, and really the signature of all game makers, is instilling fear into children, putting them in a place where they are forced to kill each other, making them fear for their lives. It tells us his role as the head game maker, the guy who crafts this nightmare, and it shows us how the kids who have to participate in it feel about it. It tells us everything we have to know about the Hunger Games, all with one perfectly placed cut. It's fantastic storytelling. All of that, the world building, the perspective, the reality TV theme, and the information about the games, all of it happens in just 35 seconds. It's an amazing opening. I love it. It manages to do so much with so little. It fulfills multiple purposes and juggles each so expertly that you don't even realize all that it's doing until you watch it over and over again. I don't say this often, but it might be perfect, much like Catching Fire. At this point, you'd think it couldn't be any better. Except it actually could be. Because I kind of lied to you earlier. I told you that this is where the movie starts, with Seneca Crane's voice.
I think it's our tradition.
But in reality, this is where the movie starts.
I think it's our tradition.
Yeah, that's a thing. Okay, let's unpack why this is so disappointing. So hopefully now you're starting to understand why I went on a little tangent earlier in this video about showing instead of telling and narration. Because while this isn't technically narration, I think it might be worse. This opening title info sequence is so unnecessary it hurts, because everything told to us during it is shown to us later on. In fact, it's shown to us literally seconds later in the opening scene with Caesar and Seneca. This part is world building, specifically world history. We learn about an uprising, about districts, and about penates. This shows us perspective. Treaty implies that history is being written by the victors. This too mentions the capital by name. This down here, while not saying reality TV, evokes that sentiment with the idea of a public arena and a pageant. And of course, we get the concept of the Hunger Games flat out explained to us. We get told all of this information in a very obvious, on-the-nose way, and then right afterwards, we get shown it in an intelligent, thoughtful, and well-written scene. AKA, we get the same exact information told to us twice in under a minute, and only the second time around is it actually good. But it doesn't end there, because we also get this same information throughout the rest of the first act, and it is shown to us in the same intelligent ways as I mentioned before.
I'm never having kids.
I might, if I didn't live here.
But you do live here.
I know, but if I did.
Time has come for us to select one courageous young man and woman for the honor of representing District 12 in the 74th Annual Hunger Games.
You root for your favorites, you cry when they get killed. It's sick.
Gail.
If no one watches, then they don't have a game. It's as simple as that.
It's okay, you're just dreaming. You're dreaming. It was me.
But aside from that, we also get this information spelled out for us during the reaping with the propaganda film. And yes, this right here is technically an info dump about the world and the premise of the story, but it works in the context of the scene. This is a public event, essentially the kickoff event of this 74-year-old Pan Am tradition. And for a state that is as totalitarian as Pan Am is, it's not unbelievable that they'd want to shove propaganda down the throats of its citizens. Having this information here at this moment makes perfect sense. So why, for the love of everything that is good and pure, why do we need the text at the beginning of the film? Even if you're not seeing it with as many facets to it as I am, even if you're just seeing it as a plain English way to tell your audience what the premise of the film is, it's still unnecessary, because you have this scene during the reaping that does the exact same job, but better. So not only is information being repeated for no reason, but it's also dampening how absolutely brilliant this opening scene is. You have a whole and dedicated portion to giving us this information, which actually makes sense since it's propaganda. So why do we need this explanation in the beginning? Why are you undermining your own opening? Why are you taking the wind out of your own sails?
Reason. What was the reason?
I don't know. I honestly don't know. Look, The Hunger Games does so much right. It avoids the dreaded unnecessary narration. It knows when to show and when to tell. But it also does this. It undermines its own phenomenal opening with words that the opening encapsulates, that the first act shows, that the reaping repeats. This is so useless. And it makes me a little sad. Like I said, I really like this film. It's one of the better YA book-to-movie adaptations out there, and I really do think this opening scene is incredible. I just wish it wasn't preceded by words, because it would be so much better without them.